How's it going? So in today's tutorial, we're going to be making this animation. It's honestly one of my favorite I've done in a really long time. First thing we're going to do is duplicate a bunch of curves and make sure that they are sitting in the right position so this animation is going to loop. Then we're going to go ahead and displace the curves and shape that displacement to look more like a topographic map. Then we're going to go ahead and parent a gradient to the camera movement, which is going to create the animation. Then we're going to go ahead and edit that gradient to create a really cool glowing effect. And then after that, we're going to use a wave texture to select the center curves to make them brighter and create a really nice focal point. Then we're going to make a simple metallic floor material and we'll be totally done. This animation is part of a series of tutorials here on YouTube that are inspired by topographic map art and animations. I'll be posting 4 of these tutorials back to back here on YouTube, so if you want to learn more of this stuff, you can go and check out the other ones like this. They're all really cool and there's a lot of fun things to learn. On Patreon, I posted what I'm calling the topographic blueprint, which is an hour and 20 minutes of training of all the shading, geometry nodes, and animation tricks that are combined to make these 4 animations and many others. Here on YouTube, all those elements are combined to make really cool animations, but on Patreon, I'm showing you every individual effect and tip and trick so that you can combine them and make your own original topographic map inspired animations. So if you want to check that out, that is going to be linked in the description, and you can get a discount if you subscribe annually. With that being said, let's get into this tutorial. All right, I'm gonna start and make my windows. So I'm just gonna go down in this, go up on that. I like my geometry nodes and my shading to be the same this ways. You can do it however you want. There really is no technical benefit to doing either way. This is just what this is my preference. Let's head into geometry nodes, and first let's hit Shift A, get a plane. I'm gonna title this Geo. You don't have to title it whatever you want. And we're gonna click New here in Geometry Nodes, delete, Shift A, and we're gonna search a grid. And we're gonna plug this right into here. We're gonna delete that. I'm gonna hit Shift A and get a quadratic Bezier, plug that here. Let's do a couple edits here. So one is a resolution of 300, and we are going to go ahead, click and drag here, hit 0, and then on the Y, we're going to give it a scale of 10, and that's going to stretch it by essentially 5 units here, 10 units here, 10 Ms, and we're happy with that. Now I want to do some duplicates down the line of this quadratic Bezier. The way I'm going to make my array, typically if I'm displacing immediately after making the array, I like to use a simulation zone for it. So we're going to get a simulation, and we're going to plug here, plug there, and then I'm just going to bring it down. Let's go ahead and get let me get a set position node, a join geometry, and then plug the curve into the join geometry just like that. I want to move it by 0.13 this direction. Now when I press play, it is going to give me a bunch of duplicates, and I believe 77 is the amount that I wanted to go with. Then once you're done, you can go ahead and get a bake node and bake it, and you're all set. Now I'm going to go ahead, get another set position node just to move it to the center of where I'll be working, using my camera, all of that, just to keep everything in this loop working correctly. So I'm going to go ahead on the X and the Y and do a -5, and that is just going to plop it exactly where I'd want it to be. Now we can get our set position node that is going to create our actual displacement. So let's get another set position node. We're going to get a combine XYZ node, plug that into the offset, and let's plug a noise texture into the Z. So we'll get that noise, plug color into the Z. Now we have some displacement. I'm going to go ahead and click on normalize, give myself a scale of 0.5. That looks really good. And then let's get a vector math node so that we can play with the strength of this effect. We're going to click on scale, and that is just going to be a scale, like a scale value here. So I'm just going to keep it at 1 for now. And what I don't want is, if I look at here from the right or the left, I want it to kind of cut off. I want there to be some flat portions. Right now it's like all wave. I want some portions where it goes down to look like the flat ground. And so the way I can do that, the way I prefer to do it, you can use color ramp. That will just straight up crunch it flat. That's not that fun. So we're going to do a RGB curves node. I'm going to add a point here, here, here. And then the part that's the most important, I'm going to add a point right here in the middle of this bottom square bring this up, and that's going to create these flat portions, but that aren't perfectly flat. It's going to give you, maybe the word nuance might be fun. It's going to give you a little bit of nuance in the flat portions, but not completely kill our ability to have it more flat. And maybe we can bring it down like this, give it some more flat areas. And then you can play with that scale to give some parts that go up. So now we have some flat parts that are still a little bit wavy, and those are really going to be pronounced once we're playing with this animation some more. So now we have this ready to go. Now we are going to be making a looping animation, and the biggest part of making this loop is the first and the last frame needing to look exactly the same so that this is a seamless looping animation. The problem is if I duplicate this geometry nodes, whatever we're going to call it, object, you can see a seam, or a very obvious seam. You can see how it does not connect from one duplicate to the next. How can I duplicate this texture but make it so that it connects? Because if we can't do that, this animation breaks. So what I need to do is first mirror this displacement, then I can duplicate the displacement. So what I can do is get a transform geometry node and a join geometry node, and then plug this into the join. Now what we've done is made a duplicate. So remember, we made this 10, a scale of 10, which means here on the Y, if I move it down by 10, it's going to perfectly move it down this direction. And then here on the scale, if I do a -1, it is going to flip that. And now it mirrors our displacement. There is a discernible seam. It's not super obvious, especially if you're just a viewer of the animation, you're not looking for it. If this bothers you, there's really not much you can do about it. But we now have made a mirror of this. So now what I can do is get another transform geometry node, join geometry, make another duplicate, and move this guy down by 20. Now we can just literally duplicate, 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 and this is a seamless pattern. So that's what I wanted to make in order for this animation to loop seamlessly. So now let's go ahead and give this a little bit of geometry. So I'm going to do a curve to mesh and a curve circle. Just to keep this a little bit lighter, I'm going to do a resolution of 4, a radius of 0.005, and then I'm going to plug this right into the profile curve. Now we have some actual geometry we can add a material to, which is, this is going to be a great time to start adding materials. So we're going to get a set material node. We're going to go here to the shading, create a material, and then grab it right here. You can even name it, and you can see that's the material we made. So what I can do right now is, before we create the material, I want to get the camera moving because the camera is going to affect the shading. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys my method for kind of making sure loops loop. So I know that I scaled this. These strings are 10 m long. So that means in real space here, if I hit S5, that is how big our object, our scene, our object is, and then we mirrored it right at there. And so our camera needs to go the length of 2 of these cubes, 2 of these planes, and if we do that, it's going to loop. So I'm going to go ahead and just set up my camera view, my camera angle, however I want it to be, something like this. And then I'm going to get a camera control, Alt-0, snap it to view. I like, if we go here to the camera settings, a focal length of 100. That really gives it this nice flat view. And then I'm just going to tighten my view in a little bit till all the strings are within view. Now what I can do is I'm going to hit the tilde key and go to the top. I'm actually also going to I'm going to delete this just to make sure you guys know what's going on. Take this plane and hit Alt D. That is going to create an instance, and then hold down Control, and that is going to snap everything. I neglected to say that. Make sure that you are snapping and then hitting Alt D, and I'm hit Alt D again. And so what happens is when I add a material to him, it'll add a material to these instances that I just created. So again, holding down Control so that this animation will perfectly loop. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit the tilde key, go to the top, and the camera needs to start exactly on this line here at the very, very exact edge of this cube, which is the exact edge of this geometry node scene. So I know that it needs to be -5. You can kind of see this thicker line right here coinciding with that. So let's get our animation. So I'm gonna hit the back arrow and then hit the back arrow again on my keyboard to go to frame 0. And then you can double check in your animation preferences. Your default interpolation is linear. That is going to ensure a perfect loop. I'm gonna give myself 400 frames. I may start my camera at -5. I'm gonna bring my cursor to 400. I don't think cursor was the right word. I'm gonna hold down Control, bring it all the way to the edge of this second plane right here. And you could double check if it says 15, you're in the right place. And now, if I press play, let's watch the animation. And wow, it's really slow. Now, if I press play, that's very, very slow, which is weird. That didn't happen when I rehearsed this. If it is really slow, you're not getting any good playback. It's lagging out. What you can do is go back to geometry nodes and get a resample curve node, and I'll just plop it right before the curve to mesh. And that's going to just make essentially your curves low poly, and it should, okay, yeah, so that'll make your scene a little bit lighter. You could remove that later. And so now we have this. If we just watch the animation play through all the way to the end, so we'll just wait around, we're just gonna double check that this animation is going to loop seamlessly. So we're watching. And then once we get to the edge, just pay attention. Okay, loop seamlessly, 400 to 0. So now we have that. We can go ahead and start working on our shading, because the camera's going, like I said, the camera's going to heavily affect the shading. So I'm gonna go back to geometry nodes, and I'm gonna mute that that resample curve node. So we can go here now to the shading, and we have that material that we labeled dude for no reason. And then you can create this in Eevee or Cycles. So I'm just gonna design this in Eevee. I'm gonna personally render this in Cycles because it just looks better. So I'm gonna go down here and give myself an emission strength of 3. We can now see this, this object now. I'm gonna go ahead, get my color ramp, plug it into the color, and I'm gonna plug it into the alpha. Let's get a gradient texture. And if you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, comes with Blender by default, just hit Control T or get a mapping node and a texture coordinate node and plug in the object, and then plug color into color ramp, and you're gonna see this gradient working. Now in Eevee, see how it's like this noisy transparency? You can go here to the material settings and go from dithered to blended, and that's gonna give you sort of that OG Eevee looking transparency. And then here on the rotation, I'm gonna rotate it by 90 degrees so that it's going the right direction that I want. So one thing we need to do, I'm gonna hit Shift A and get an empty plane axis. What we're gonna do there is now I'm gonna click back on my curves, and I'm gonna go over here to the object coordinate and grab the empty. So what's gonna happen now is when I click on my empty and I move the empty around, that controls the position of the gradient. So here's what's cool. I'm gonna click on the camera, I'm gonna hold down Shift, click on the empty, Control P, and click on object. Now what's gonna happen is I'm gonna hit this drop down, click on my empty, and just bring it forward a little bit. When I press play, that transparency is going to, because the empty is mapped to the camera, as this camera moves, it's going to write, or it kind of looks like it's writing the geometry. Writing these waves, this sort of topographic map vibe. So that is what I wanted. So that is how we create this really cool effect. I'm going to go ahead and make a timeline down here just for me, wherever it is. So now we can start making this look really cool. So go ahead and just click on Geo. We're going to go back here to the color ramp. I'm going to get a brand new node here. And then I'm going to make it red so you guys can kind of see the differentiation of what things are doing what. This black portion is what we don't see over here. It's the same thing that's creating the alpha. So over here is represented by this black node. And then this white node is all the stuff behind it. And this red one is obviously this middle section. So what we can do is I can just make it a pure white, make it the brightest thing. And this, make it that darker portion. And then bring this in. And I'm actually going to switch it over to constant so that there's no fade between the two. And then I can just bring this in so we have this one really bright section of the curves. So that's how we create that really cool effect. And then we can head into the compositing, turn on use nodes, get a glare node, and turn on fog glow. And then we can head back to shading and then turn on always. And that's how we get that glare. So you can bring this up just like that. So what I'm gonna do is bring this gray portion a little bit brighter to be something right around here. And then let's do a really cool thing. What I wanna do is have a focal point right here in the middle of the curve so that it's not all just like all of them the same brightness. I think having this really cool focal point will make this stand out. So I'm gonna go ahead and get a mix color node. I'm gonna hit Control-Shift-D. So duplicate the color ramp, make sure the gradient is plugged into it, and plug this into B. And I'm just bring the factor over. On this one here, I'm gonna get a hue saturation value node. And I'm gonna bring the value down to 0. So now we have a color ramp that's going to mix between a 0, one with a value of 0, and the default. And we're gonna use a wave texture to make what kind of looks like a selection of the middle ones. So let's get a wave texture. Let's plug the mapping into that, and we need to get a color ramp. Plug him here and plug him into the factor so we can differentiate. So now the wave texture is creating this. Now, if you like this effect, go nuts, go with it. We're actually gonna go from X to Y, and it's gonna create this selection here. So I'm gonna bring the color ramp in like this. And then I'm just gonna bring that phase to make this in the middle. So see how it's over there? It's still a wave. We're just sort of making the wave big enough so that this selection is happening here. So I want maybe that many of the middle. And then we can go back to the hue sat node and bring the value up a little bit. So now we have these middle ones brighter than the side ones, and it looks super cool. All right. So let's get this animation over with. One thing I want to do, bring this over. I'm gonna get another mix color node, and I'm gonna plug this final mix color into the factor. I'm gonna make this one up here black, this one up here white, and then just change the color. So you can use this mix node to change the color of all these things, because then you'd have to go like into each one and make sure the color is. This is sort of your master color, and then we can just bring that brightness up a little bit, so we can still get our glare, and this is getting a nice color. Something like this. All right, let's now focus on the floor material, make that pretty, and we're gonna be done. So I'm gonna switch over to cycles, and then I'm gonna hit this drop down scene world, scene lights, just so we can see what we're doing. So I'm gonna click this first plane right up here in my outliner. I'm gonna click new, I'm gonna make it metallic, and then you can change the color just to make sure you know, yep, this is affecting everything, cool. So what I wanna do is turn on my denoiser. So we're gonna get in a color ramp, plug that into the roughness. We're gonna get in a Voronoi texture. We're gonna hit Control T, use the object coordinate, and use color, plug that into the color ramp. So now we're gonna get this really nice pattern, bring random to the left and give it a scale of 60. And then right here, this black portion of the color ramp represents the most like shiny, most reflective portions of this texture. I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit so it's not perfectly mirror-like. And then I'm going to bring this one down a little bit so that everything is kind of in that middle ground. You can see how it's looking over there, over here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bump node, plug color into height, normal to normal, and then I'm going to do a filter width of 1.5. That's going to give us this nice bumpiness that's going to affect the light. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to click on my wires here. I'm going to hover over here and hit Control C, go back over here. We're going to get a color ramp. I'm going to click on the white one and just Control V, paste that color into there. Color here, color of the Voronoi, plug it into that, and then we're going to give it a strength of like 3. I'm going to hit this drop down. We're just going to go back to our normal lights and then bring this black portion of the color ramp in until we get enough of these little orange pieces. What that gives us is if I get my world brightness to be black, a little bit of context of, oh, there's still some stuff over there. Because if I look at this in Eevee, let me just get my normal lights. As we're moving, those little cubes are going to move at us. And I just think that gives this a little bit more context. I'm going to go and move my empty up a little bit. I want more of these waves to be making up this scene. So this is what we have so far. What I want to do is bring down the value of a little bit more so we can mostly see this. Another thing that's going to make this scene look really awesome. Let me wait till I have a flat portion. There we go. Is click on the camera, go over here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on depth of field, bring the f-stop down really far so we can see exactly what it's focusing on. And then just focus on those middle portions. And then you can go and bring your f-stop back up till you like how sensitive it is. You can even at this point bring your camera in even closer, making sure the things that are out of focus are exactly what you want. And we're done. Let me go ahead and just give this one render and see how this final output is going to look. So here we go. This is the final output of this animation. It looks really awesome. It's really beautiful. You can have a lot of fun with it. Let me show you the export settings that I would recommend for this. 1900 by 1080, or if you want it 4K, just type in 200. I would highly recommend a PNG sequence. Just make a folder, throw them in there, and then compile that. If you don't want to do that, you just want Blender to spit out a video, you don't want to compile PNGs, you can go here to FFmpeg video, encoding to MP4 or QuickTime. If you're on Mac, use QuickTime. MP4 if you're on a PC, and then do perceptually lossless render animation. And when you're done, you'll have something really cool like mine. So there you go. That is how you create this really cool topographic landscape inspired animation, really whatever you want to call it. But that is it. Again, if you want to check out the long form video I made on Patreon about all the different techniques that you can do to combine and make more animations just like this from your own imagination, you can check that out on Patreon. A lot of really cool stuff packed in that video. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.